The nomination and ultimate confirmation of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was one of the most significant events of 2018. The whole process unfolded like a circus, and it captivated Americans nationwide.
A new book, Justice on Trial, The Kavanaugh Confirmation, the Future of the Supreme Court, details the selection process and the often contentious confirmation hearings. It also examines how we got to this point. Joining us to discuss this book is one of the authors, Carrie Severino. She serves as Chief Counsel and Policy Director for the Judicial Crisis Network. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
So you have this book is literally riddled with scoops and behind the scenes of what happened in here. What do you think one of the most dramatic moments that you were able to capture for the audience in this book?
One of my favorites is one that Molly and I didn't even know really had happened when we started doing the interviews for this book. I mean, we ended up talking to over 100 people, from the president, senators, Supreme Court justices on down. But one that kept coming back, especially in people in the Senate, was the scene in the anteroom. This is after Jeff Flake, famously kind of walks out of the markup hearing, not decided about exactly how he's going to vote for Kavanaugh. He went and decided. He has this moment at the elevator, and then he steps out of the room with Chris Coons. And when we first heard this story, where he's in this back room, it's a small area, there's just a conference table, there's a bathroom, there's the phone booth. He and Chris Coons are packed in this phone booth, and as people realize this is where the action's happening, of the discussion of how are we going to move forward with the Kavanaugh nomination, more and more people pack into the room. So you've got some people in the bathroom doing one kind of strategic thing. You've got multiple senators in the bathroom, calling the ABA about back and forth about their comments on Judge Kavanaugh. You've got more people trying to fit in the phone booth. At one point, there's like 3.5 people in that phone booth. The room is packed with dozens of people. We're talking total chaos. There's senators in there, there's staff. The senators are trying to kick the staff out. The staff can't even get out because there's people outside the doors trying to get in. And the craziest moment is even when you have apparently one senator threatening to punch another senator. I mean, this is so beyond the pale for behavior. We would ask people toward the end, after we realized this is a thing, because so many people talk about it.
Who's going to punch who and why?
I think we'll leave that
Okay,
another day.
All right.
But
If you read the book, you can try to guess.
So much frustration. And a lot of the Republicans felt the Democrats had really abused the process, and there were people still frustrated about Senator Feinstein's handling of the allegations. And then there were concerns because some people were seeing tension where people's staff were pushing them one way or the other. So it was crazy. I asked some people, was it as crazy as we have heard? They said, no, much crazier. And then as one staffer left the room, he said to another, I think we just witnessed history.
Wow.
It was wild.
Well, and so people understand your perspective. I mean, you were watching this closely. You've been an ally and advocate for Justice Kavanaugh and for conservatives on the Supreme Court in general. What was it that you wanted people to understand from this book that they may not have understood from the news coverage?
Yeah, I mean, we all watched this happen in real time, but I knew there were a lot of stories that hadn't been told or that hadn't been fully told. And I, as someone who clerked for Justice Thomas, I also knew that what we saw with his nomination is after he was confirmed, and when he was confirmed, 2-1 Americans believed him over Anita Hill. That's black, white, men, women. There's been a campaign of rewriting that narrative. I thought if we can get the actual facts out there, that will at least help avoid revisionist history. And I knew there were a lot of facts that hadn't been fully reported by the media. So our job was just to talk to as many people as we could and get as much information out there to try to have a really definitive account available to the public. And especially because I hope this doesn't happen again. This was a really traumatic process, not just for obviously the Kavanaughs, but for the whole country. I worry about whether qualified men and women are going to want to step up to these offices if that's what they think they have to face, this politics of personal destruction.
I couldn't agree more with you, Carrie. I think the Kavanaugh hearings are one of the defining political moments of the Trump era, if not the defining moment. A lot of people I know looked at that, and that informed. I knew people on that spot saying, "Because of this, I'm going to vote for Trump in 20." Who didn't even like Trump.
Look, it changed the outcome of some Senate contests in red states. There's no doubt in my mind about it having played in some of those states.
Exactly, it had a downstream effect, a cultural effect that we're still not really reckoning with.
Amy McGrath still is dealing with the fallout of this with Mitch McConnell.
How were you able to capture that? And that's actually what I'm most interested in. Not just the behind the scenes, how it all happened, but the effect on our body politic as a country. I mean, it was a cultural moment that, it's one of those things where whenever you're in this business, most of the stuff doesn't penetrate. But that one, I mean, you can go on Facebook at that time without seeing somebody with an opinion.
Oh yeah, and so we didn't just talk to people that were inside. We also wanted to talk to the outside groups, and it was very interesting talking to people, from groups like Concerned Women for America or Susan B. Anthony list. What was really interesting is the people who were going and talking to real voters and knocking on doors. Some of them said, actually, you would think, ironically, after the allegations, people's interest and support for Kavanaugh grew. And I think it was because they saw there was a backlash to the frustration, again, with mishandling of the allegations, with people that they saw not actually treating it, trying to get to the truth, but really just using it as a political football. And it radicalized a lot of people. So we document several cases where we think because Democrats overplayed their hand there, it actually had backlashes. And the people who were talking to the average voter on the street got to see that, and they were saying this is some of the most engaged we've seen people since Obamacare, since some of these really epic fights. So it had a major impact, and I think it will continue. We were seeing so much interest in this, where we thought maybe people will say, oh, we already know everything about this. No, there is a real hunger, and people still feel like this is an unresolved issue.
I mean, in my view, it's not surprising to me that the women here, and Christine Blasey Ford in particular, was not believed, because women are often not believed in this country. But one of the impacts that I specifically wanted to ask you about is, are you concerned about the increasing sort of partisan politicization of the court and what that's meant? Because the flip side of the reaction on the right and the sort of radicalization that I think you speak to, that I think is correct, on the left, you've had another kind of radicalization. I mean, you have a number of presidential candidates talking about packing the court, right? It's just not viewed with the same sort of hands-off reverence that it once was. I would say that process started when Merrick Garland's wasn't even brought up for hearings by Mitch McConnell and was cemented into place by this situation with Brett Kavanaugh. Do you worry about what that's doing to the court?
Yeah, however, I'd say the process started well before that, actually, and we really
that's
go
fair.
back.
That's fair.
We go back and look at the trend, and what we have seen is that for generations, like for decades, liberals have been actually very effective in achieving their goals on the court. That a lot of times, even the conservative nominees, in many cases, were very happy to produce liberal results, and I don't even mean by liberal results interpreting a liberal law as it's written, because I think that's actually what they should be doing, so that it goes to what the law says. I mean, using the courts as an end run, many cases, around things that weren't able to get passed by the elected representatives, that the courts are willing to achieve those results.
Give an example.
So I think there's a lot of examples. So you can do a lot of these the deference to regulatory agencies allows that to happen. Certainly a lot of these culture war issues, like abortion, like marriage, where you're taking an issue out of the hands of the people.
I mean, abortion's been a long time ago now, but
we're talking,
would be a modern example, right?
Yeah, we're talking, but we go through some of this history, and it does go back decades. So anytime you're taking something and the court is taking on an issue that actually isn't given to it, it's turning itself into more of a political body. So as long as the court is acting politically, we shouldn't be surprised to see political results in nominations. I think, and I endorse originalism in part because I think that would take out the politics. If you have judges who are really committed to the text of the law, to what the original understanding it is, that doesn't say I have a finger in the wind to where do I think the American people is going, what do I think the best policy is. All of that is going to turn into a proxy for their own politics. I think try to get as objective as possible. It will downgrade the politics.
I'm not going to deign to debate you on originalism because you're much better schooled in this. I think at times, we don't know what the framers thought. We don't have the context. A lot of these concepts were left intentionally vague. But on the piece of the politicization of the court, this president in particular seems to see the court as his guys. Right? He talked about how, a case was going to go to the Ninth Circuit and they'd strike it down, and then he'd go to the Supreme Court and I would win. And he thinks that this court is his court. Does that also do damage to the institution?
Look, the president has a shorthand of the way he talks about things in the public, but at the end of the day, when you look at the types of judges he's appointing and has said and explicitly campaigned on appointing, it's people who do embrace originalism and textualism, and he didn't just say that generally. He actually gave names, so you can see these are people, again, this means this puts it back in the hands of...
The question, though, is whether he sees these as his guys who are just going to be loyal to him and back him up, which is how he seems to view the court.
I think it's actually, there may be some of that, but I think more he's concerned about judges where the image is that they are just going against him because he's Donald Trump. And I think there is real evidence to support that there are certain judges. I think more than judges saying, I'm going to give this win because it's Trump. I think there's a lot of judges out there who kind of view it as almost their patriotic duty to go against this president because of who he is in ways that they wouldn't under almost any other president doing almost any of the same policies. I mean, some of his policies actually aren't as different from President Obama's as maybe some people would even like to see, but you see the courts treating them differently because of that perspective.
I think you're right, Carrie. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if Justice Kavanaugh or Justice Gorsuch end up disappointing the president because they don't. There's a lot of misunderstanding sometimes about their judicial interpretations of law and whenever it comes to executive power in particular. And I think the final question, what we really want to get to is, what was it about this particular process that just broke all understandings about the Supreme Court? Because I really believe that on the next confirmation, regardless of who it is, it could get much worse. And it's like, and you document this in the book, the releasing of confidential documents. I mean, Dianne Feinstein's staff leaking this information to the press. Then you have the press themselves abandoning almost all standards whenever it comes to reporting some of these allegations, all in an explicit political effort to shape the Supreme Court. How do you see that playing out in the next one?
Yeah, it's really frightening because, of course, this is what happens when you had a swing seat and a swing vote who, frankly, was more conservative than liberal being replaced by a Trump nominee. What happens if it were Justice Ginsburg, if it were any of the other liberal justices being replaced by a Trump nominee? I can't even imagine. I would say World War III, but I think we just had that. So, you know, it's really a worry for me, you know, how we get there. And I think there were a lot of things that went into it. It was violating norms, you know, disclosing information. Someone, we don't know if it was Feinstein's staff or another Senate staffer who leaked this information. They purposely went around procedures that were created in the Thomas Hill era to try to allow, I mean, these kind of allegations should actually be investigated by the Senate, but they shouldn't be done in this huge media circus. It should be done in a way that's confidential to protect both the accuser and the nominee. That was a system that was intentionally sidelined. And I don't think Feinstein has a good excuse saying she wanted confidentiality because that's what the system was designed to produce. So
I think that's fair.
If we can't obey those systems, we won't be able to do this well.
The alternate, you know, the alternate reality is Democrats elect a Democratic president this time around and are able to defeat Trump. The Senate is very likely to remain in Mitch McConnell's hands. And we could very easily see a circumstance where you have several vacancies in the Supreme Court and McConnell refuses even to bring the nominees up for a hearing, right?
I don't think that's like, I mean, if you had a nominee, the Merrick Garland thing was a unique situation because it was happening in this presidential election year. You knew you were having a change of power. If you had
he would do it up till the day of the election. I mean, that was completely unprecedented.
The converse is that if it were to happen, like, you know, day one of a Democratic presidency, there would just be no way that they would do that.
Oh, are you kidding me?
No, I really, I mean,
Mitch McConnell?
I don't.
Oh, he would hold out
not for 4 years.
Forever.
Well, you know, the check there, honestly, the majority, 2/3 of the Supreme Court nominees who haven't been confirmed, it's actually because they didn't get a hearing, or they didn't, not a hearing because hearings have been a recent thing, but didn't get a vote. So that's actually not that unusual historically. And really the check the Constitution gives us on that is the check of the people. So if what Mitch McConnell doing is people thinks, you know, this person should get a vote, then they're going to speak at the polls, and that's the check. If the American people are saying, hey, actually, we're concerned about this nominee and we don't really want to see them going anywhere either, then you're going to see that. This is, you know, it's weird when you get divided government because you're getting a mixed message from the American people. You're getting, you know, move forward here, but there's a check here, and that's how it works. That's how it works itself out in the political process.
I don't think the court's ever going to be the same. I think that's the reality.
I agree.
Carrie, great to have you. Thank you so much.
Day.
Congrats on the book.
Thanks, Carrie.
Coming up, presidential candidates' fundraising totals have been released.
We're going to talk about who has the most money and how much that actually matters with Team Rising. That's next, so stay tuned.